Thanks for joining us, friends. This is Sean from SGT Report, and on the line we are very gratified to have back author and founder of goldsilver.com, Mike Maloney. Mike, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
And also on the line is our daily contributor at SGT Report, Rory.
Hello.
Hello. Well, it's exciting to have Mike back on the line, and today we are going to talk some details about the Hidden Secrets of Money 3, Dollar Crisis to Golden Opportunity, and we're very excited for you all to see it. It is going to be released on Tuesday morning, September 24th, and you're sure not going to want to miss it because it is epic. Mike, I had the opportunity to watch this thing this morning and again last night, actually. I've watched it twice, and it's really a stunning piece of work. People are going to be very, very excited. It should go viral. As I was telling you before we started recording here, I really think this thing ought to be on CNBC, and it ought to get out to tens of millions of people. But it's just a fabulous piece of work.
Thank you. Yeah, my producer, director, Dan Rubach, is really responsible for this. And then all of the beautiful animations are, the 3Ds are Aidan Magnus, and the two-dimensional animations are Lincoln Jude.
There's just a stunning piece of animation at about the 16-minute mark, which complements Jim Rickards. We'll talk about that as we get into this interview, but this thing is every bit as good as anything that can be seen on television. I want to quote you from the very first part of the piece in which you say, Mike, "Now the rest of the world are turning their backs on the U.S. dollar standard. This is going to cause a financial calamity, the likes of which we have never seen before. It's going to be devastating for most people. I don't want this to happen, but the damage has already been done." That was powerful for me to really get into the piece, Mike, because you know what you're saying is we've hit the point of no return, and you can either make your bet for paper currencies or you can make your bet for gold and silver and hard assets, which you cover in the video. And it just seems to me we're getting closer and closer to the cliff.
Yeah, well, you know, when Ben Bernanke just announced that they would not taper, that was an admission that they cannot taper. About every 4 years or so, there is a recession, 4 or 5 years. And we are 4 years into this economic recovery and or this growth pattern, and now that's going to be slowing down. We're going to slide into the next recession. And when you have an addiction like this, we are credit addicted. The markets are credit addicted. When you have an addiction, it always requires more and more of the drug to get the same high. So for stimulus to be able to have any effect, they always have to increase it. Well, they've kept the same amount of stimulus now since January, and it's having less effect. And you know, Ben Bernanke announced that they weren't going to stop the stimulus, that they were going to continue printing, and the markets rallied, and gold rallied, and the dollar fell. And what it is an admission that they can never stop this. If they stop it, the markets will crash. It'll send us into either the most severe recession or even a depression. And that is eventually what I'm expecting, is some depression that will eclipse the Great Depression. It'll be the Greater Depression. But it's not going to be bad for everybody. It's going to be a wealth transfer from 1,000 people to 1 or something like that. And the 1,000 to 1 ratio is going to be from the average public that is not getting prepared to those who are getting prepared, the people that are in precious metals especially, but all sorts of hard assets. Now, real estate was just in its greatest bubble in history recently, and we haven't revisited undervaluation yet. So we haven't gone to a space that clears out excess inventories and excess jobs that were created in that sector. And people are thinking that real estate is back and, everything's peachy again. And so the public does not realize that this printing of $85 billion a month, this is an emergency maneuver. There is still an emergency going on out there. It's not over with. And at this point, it's probably going to start getting worse.
I'd be remiss not to ask you about this past Friday's Precious Metals Slam. Silver was down about $1.25. Gold plummeted around $40. And why? Well, because some Fed establishment shill named James Bullard from the St. Louis Fed Bank said, quote, "No rush to taper while inflation is low, Mike." He said the tech bubble and the housing bubble were both, no secret, bubbles of the past were gigantic and obvious, but not now, end quote. Mike, he must not be considering the bond bubble, huh?
Bubbles of the past were gigantic and obvious?
That's what he said.
Well, then how come Ben Bernanke and Alan Greenspan were saying that there was no bubble just as the bubble was peaking and popping? You know?
Exactly.
If they're so obvious, then how come the people that are running things can't see them? I think they can see them, but they have to lie, actually.
I agree. I totally agree. I was just going to say the same thing. Is it really possible that any one man, any one person, in this case, James Bullard, would have the gravitas and the international importance to utter these words, and it would really truly cause gold and silver to plummet like that? It's just absurd. It's just I think it's manipulation behind the scenes, because it just makes no sense. Those words are not going to change everyone's opinion and turn this thing around on a dime.
It could be, or it may not be. The thing is, when gold falls, everybody screams manipulation, and sometimes it is manipulation, but sometimes it's just the price going down, because prices go up and down. The price went up on Ben Bernanke's announcement of not tapering, and so is that manipulation to the upside? Because these up days, that up day was equivalent in scale to the down days that happened in June, where everybody was screaming manipulation. And I've recently, for the insiders, the people at the clients of goldsilver.com that either bought our insiders program or purchased more than 500 ounces of silver or more than 10 ounces of gold, they get access to things that the rest of the public doesn't get access to. And I announced that I would do a webinar for them, and I was barraged with questions. I said I would take questions from our insiders only, and I got more than 200 emails, and some of them had more than 10 questions. But a huge proportion of them were people asking about the manipulation. And they were saying that, how come the manipulators always win? When is this going to end? Well, take a look at a 12-year chart of gold and tell me that the manipulators are winning. If the manipulators were winning, gold would be below $250 an ounce, and it's not. All they can do is manipulate it back for a short while, and then the free market pushes on further with its climb. So what they're doing is basically a managed retreat, and so they've been managing whenever the price goes up too much. When the price falls, you can bet that in the next several months there's going to be some bad news. This announcement of not tapering, and the price being, and this could be that there was a manipulation on Friday, there's probably some very bad stuff coming up this fall, as far as Europe, as far as the U.S. economy, the debt ceiling talks, all of this. Whenever you see gold looking like it's being managed to the downside, manipulated, there's usually some bad news coming out, and they can't have it setting record highs and have bad news at the same time, because it'll go into a runaway.
Well, let me ask you this then, Mike, as it relates to the dollar, because you really make the point in Dollar Crisis to Golden Opportunity here in Hidden Secrets of Money 3, that the dollar's already toast, and you have a really frightening, a shocking timeline, actually, a shocking timeline from 1970 to 2010, which you are calling nails in the coffin, and you're citing really recent and shocking examples of how the dollar really is already toast as the world's reserve currency. You cite China and Russia's bilateral trade agreement, China and Japan, India and Japan, China and Brazil. It's just a litany of bad news for the U.S. dollar. Can you tell people about that section of the film? Because I think it is the most eye-opening part of the movie for me.
Well, it's really a continuation of the previous episode, number 2, where I show, when I was writing my book, I'm a believer in cycles, and I was looking for a cycle to the crises that we've had in the past, all the monetary crises, the stock market crashes, the recessions, depressions, and so on. So I loaded into a spreadsheet every crisis that I could identify from the beginning of the United States through the book. I was doing this back in 2005. And one thing stuck out dramatically is that every 30 to 40 years, the world has a new monetary system. We had the end of the classical gold standard during World War I. Then we had a intra-war gold standard, a gold exchange standard. And then from World War II to 71, we had the Bretton Woods system. And from 71 till today, we had the dollar standard, U.S. dollar standard, where the world, for one country, if Mexico wants to pay Germany for cars that they've imported, the car dealer, the bank will convert Mexican pesos to U.S. dollars, wire transfer those to Germany, where they get converted then into euros and deposited into the businessman's account. And the whole world worked this way. They used the dollar as the international wire transfer currency. And so every country on the planet was holding dollars, and the majority of the dollars reside outside the United States because of this. We're the only country on the planet that has had this privilege of having the world's reserve currency. And what it means is that we can pay all of our debts by printing currency. Mm-hmm. So it truly was a privilege. But for the past decade or so, our politicians have been abusing this as though it was their birthright, with these enormous amounts of deficit spending and currency creation. And what you're seeing is the world is starting to turn its back on this. What I show in the video, there's a timeline that shows when Nixon took us off of the Bretton Woods system and the dollar standard began, and then there's this big calm before the storm. And this calm goes all the way up to the Iraq, when Saddam Hussein announced that he was going to sell oil in euros.
Right. And
that was the first one of these golden nails in the dollar's coffin.
That's right.
They're just speeding up to where it's happening every month. Since that presentation, Australia has made a bilateral trade agreement with China. So they no longer use dollars when China is paying Australia for all of the, 30% of Australia's exports are basically raw materials going to China. Australia is a big raw material country. They've got natural resources, a lot of mining in Australia. And a lot of it goes to China. And China is now paying them not with U.S. dollars, but with yuan. And then the Eurozone is starting to do some of this. So now we're seeing major economies starting to bypass the U.S. dollar. Well, if 50% of them are outside the United States and countries stop using them, what do they do with them? They do exactly what happened back in the late 80s. I don't know if you remember when Japan was having its big economic boom. It was in a bubble. It felt rich, and all the dollars that when we would buy Japanese goods back in the 80s, those excess dollars came back to the United States and caused asset prices here to skyrocket as they bought up things like Lincoln Center in New York and downtown Los Angeles. They were buying all of the Class A pieces of real estate across the United States, and prices in real estate just soared. And so as these dollars come back, you've heard people talk about exporting inflation in the past. Well, that's how we export inflation. We buy something from overseas and we send them our dollars, and it inflates their economy, not ours. They've got the excess currency that we printed. Well, now those dollars they're going to come back over here and start buying stuff as they no longer have a use for these dollars. And so that, coupled with the addiction that Ben Bernanke, when he announced no tapering, this was an admission that the dollar is toast. They are going to print the dollar into oblivion instead of letting the economy try to flush out excesses and stuff. They want to try and hold us from going. Whenever you have a bubble, after the bubble, you have to visit undervaluations. You have to go through some sort of recession or depression to clear out all of the excesses that were created during the bubble. This is something that the free market just requires. And they're trying desperately to prevent that from happening. Right. And as they do, it just causes more and more energy to be built up. And when the free market overwhelms that manipulation, so that manipulation, the manipulation in bonds, the manipulation in interest rate pricing, not allowing something called the price discovery mechanism to work. When you manipulate price information, it skews an economy, it builds energy, and one day that all of that implodes.
The timeline, Mike, made me wonder one other thing I'll share with you. I thought it was rather amusing, but when Saddam Hussein wanted to sell oil in euros, we went into Iraq. When Gaddafi was talking about going to a gold dinar, we went into Libya. My question is, when will the Pentagon and the administration make the case for bombing Utah? Because Utah's off the hook, right? They've returned to gold and silver as legal tender, thank God. Good for them.
Yeah. Well, I've spoken with some of the members of the Utah legislature that are pushing for this, and they brought in a bunch of CPAs to explain to the Utah legislature, to educate them, that the federal government is basically bankrupt. About half of the state funding comes from the federal government. So they anticipate that about half of their funding will one day vanish. And what they're doing is they're putting in a plan B. What do we do on the day that this happens? So they think that the dollar is also toast, and the reason that that they've made gold and silver legal tender once again in Utah is so that they have a plan B, so that the currency system can still work if gold is a currency there. If the dollar collapses, there's a plan B, gold.
Right.
And silver.
Yeah, jump in, Rory. Go ahead.
I want to go back to the nails in the coffin.
Well, they're speeding up.
They are.
That was the point of the presentation, is a monetary system, when it's a man-made monetary system that a bunch of economists get together and they create, there was an emergency meeting called the Genoa Conference in 1922 to come up with a new world monetary system. And then they did it again with the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944, where there was an emergency meeting of the world's finance ministers to come up with a new world monetary system. That was the Bretton Woods system. And then Nixon, when he, in that speech where he ends the Bretton Woods system, he calls for the creation of an urgently needed new world monetary system. And that was something where it was called the Group of 10 coming up with the Smithsonian Agreement. We're headed, before the end of this decade, there is going to be some sort of emergency meeting of the G20 finance ministers or something like this to hash out a new world monetary system. It's just history repeating. And the point is, any man-made system cannot possibly last. They aren't permanent. It's a man-made system where it cannot account for all of the forces in the free market. Nobody is smarter than the free market. The market knows all the price information going on in an economy. One person, Ben Bernanke, or a small group of people, the FOMC committee, cannot possibly have all that information. They're just not smarter than the free market. I'm sorry, go ahead with your question.
You had listed it at least 27 different nails. I went through and I've watched the video 3 times, counted each one of the nails that you listed.
There's been another dozen since that.
Exactly. And from my perspective, that coffin looks pretty well shut tight. But the question that I have is that why would China or Russia in particular want the dollar to die anytime soon with everything that they have going on? I mean, they're sucking up all the gold, all the silver, excuse me, that they can get their hands on.
Well, that's them
And
getting
they're
ready.
backdooring. It seems like they're kind of backdooring a new reserve currency with their direct line swaps. You know, Japan's on board, like you mentioned, Australia. I mean, these are massive economies, and all the BRICS nations. So it seems like it would be in their best interest to kind of let the slow burn, if you will, kind of proceed as it is. I mean, what's your take on that?
Well, I think that they're getting prepared for the demise of the dollar standard. That's what the accumulation in gold in China is all about, I believe. But these things unfold very slowly until the day they don't. Then it happens very, very quickly. When you study currency crises, in my lifetime, there's been twice in Mexico where people wake up one morning and 2/3 of their wealth has been nationalized, basically, by a peso devaluation that happens overnight. They do it in your sleep. And so you wake up one day and the world has changed for you. I don't expect this system to break down that way, but I think once it happens, it's going to happen rapidly. Like Jim Rickards says, there will be chaos. And there's an animation in the episode where we show currencies sort of falling like dominoes. And basically that is what I wrote in my book, that once the US dollar becomes suspect and people start rushing away from it, I believe that people around the world will look at their currencies and go, oh my God, this is just a piece of paper with numbers on it also.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that because that was the stunning animation I referred to. It happens about 15, 16 minutes into the piece. And Rickards is saying that there's 4 choices moving forward. And I wonder if there's not a fifth, which we can talk about. But the 4 choices are, number 1, multiple reserve currencies. Number 2, the SDR, which is a basket of currencies sponsored by the IMF. 3 is gold, some variation of the gold standard. And 4 is chaos. He says, I favor gold, but I fear we may get chaos. And I know that you've got some strong feelings on gold, Mike. Gold standards suck because we'll just get scammed again, you're famous for saying. Why don't you tell us, why gold standards suck? And then also, isn't there a 5th choice, which is sort of the Bill Still model, which is a sovereign government-issued currency not beholden to the Federal Reserve System, but to the people?
Yeah, okay. So with Bill Still's answer of creating currency printed by the government, and then that's all there is. They're never going to print anymore. Every 4 years, you got a different group of jokers running the thing. Right. Politicians get elected every 4 years, and they change the rules that the last guys put in place. Do you actually believe that that we could create a certain amount of currency and then never create more than that, that it would be fixed, and that politicians would never change that rule the next time that there's some crisis that they can take advantage of? Politicians want to promise more than they can pay for. And the only way they can pay for these promises that they make, is to tax us through inflation, a tax that we don't see as being a direct tax, as a cause from the stuff that we vote for, that we want, that's the free goodies that these politicians are promising us. The free goodies aren't free. That's a dynamic that doesn't exist.
Well, I want to play devil's advocate. I totally agree with you. But if I just may, okay, we'll go ahead.
Can I finish on,
sure.
On gold and silver. The difference between a gold standard and gold, a gold standard is a national currency that supposedly represents gold. You can use real gold or silver. You can use something that nature dictates the quantity of supply. And we've all the big discoveries when it comes to gold have pretty much been made. And the growth of the gold supply grows at about the rate of the population. And so if you were using real gold and silver, you would have a very, very stable monetary supply. And the thing is, governments can't create it. That's the whole reason for gold and silver. If the Bill Still model, it's a great idea.
Right.
It's just never worked. There's never been an example in history where that has worked.
Right. I was just going to play the devil's advocate role and say, well, if we take a look at, the Alexander Hamilton model and the national bank, I think where we all agree, and Bill Still agrees, is the first thing you need to do is end the Fed. Because there's absolutely no reason we need to issue currency and have it attached to 6% debt right the minute it's issued. So number one, the step is end the Fed. And, let's issue the currency the way the founders intended. But I think one would argue that back even during Alexander Hamilton's days, the currency was at least anchored, as you like to say, to precious metals, to gold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the Coinage Act.
The people have this thing in their head where they have to measure things in dollars or some name of a national currency that doesn't mean anything. They all used to represent gold, but why aren't we thinking in nanograms or grams or ounces? That's a universal currency that's the same all over the planet then. National currencies, gold standards, give governments the ability to institute capital controls. You lose freedom when you have some sort of gold standard or national currency, regardless. I mean, if we did the Bill Still model, for instance, you still have, if you travel, I've traveled an awful lot. The Hidden Secrets of Money is shot in 16 countries. And when you walk past that currency exchange window in the airport, if you're coming from Ecuador and you land in Singapore and you cross that currency exchange window with your pesos from Ecuador, they go to zero. They're not worth anything on the other side of that line. And it's the same pretty much with all world currencies except for the U.S. dollar. Some you can, because of that the global dollar standard, in some countries you can take a cab or something like that and pay with either the local currency or U.S. dollars. But still, in many countries, the U.S. dollar also goes to zero on the other side of that line. That allows governments to manipulate the currencies and allows them to control us. When you're using something that's international, like a measurement of a weight of a metal or even a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin. Governments, there's a loss of governmental control over people, which means an increase in freedom. So it's a loss for the government, bad for the government, good for the people.
Yeah, and before we lose you, let's just flush this out because gold standards suck, as you say, and I do think that you and Bill Still have two very important things in common. Number one, the Federal Reserve's just in our way. If we end the Fed, we're going to be better off. And number two, gold standards suck. The worst thing we could do is return to just a gold standard because then the wealthiest of the wealthy that hold most of the world's gold, they'll just have us right where they want us. But can you just help people understand where you come down on the gold and silver? That's the most important. We need to have both because that limits the scammer's ability to scam us.
Well, the gold and silver are the reason I come down on that side of the fence is simply because that is what the free market has chosen as money without fail for the past 2,600 years. The free market keeps on choosing gold and silver over and over again as money. And see, I'm for whatever the free market chooses. I don't want to be somebody that has an answer. Bill Still has an answer. It's his idea of what we should do. I don't want to be somebody that's promoting any particular idea. What I want to promote is that the market should choose what is the best, most efficient means for people to create prosperity through dealing with one another. Okay. And it has always chosen gold and silver, so I just have a feeling it will again.
Okay. And then the last thing that I had before we throw it back to Rory, if Rory had any follow-up questions, is one of the figures that you have in the video here is that right now, based on outstanding dollar supply, you've calculated that gold needs to be at $13,400 an ounce just to cover that outstanding dollar supply. But the Fed is going to just keep printing through 2015, so that number will just continue to rise.
Exactly. That's when I said earlier that the Fed deciding not to taper is basically an admission that the dollar will fall, gold will go up, the stock markets will go up to a certain extent, and that they are trapped. They can never get out of this. It's an admission that the dollar is toast.
I guess my last thing is, as I was watching the video, I wrote this down because it is frustrating, and you do wonder, who at this point, Mike, is this system good for, this U.S. dollar reserve currency system? Who's it even good for? Because even the people seem to be getting hurt. I mean, the richest of the rich, the top 1% are doing better than they've ever done, and the rest of us are struggling like we've never struggled. The median income has really remained the same. Actually, people are making less money now than they used to make in the 60s, inflation adjusted. Who is this system even good for at this point?
I shouldn't be talking about the fourth episode yet, but in the fourth episode, you're going to see how the world monetary system works. 99.999% of the people on the planet do not understand it, and it's an animation that makes it very easy to understand. So this will be the first time that people really get how it works. But it's a system based on a 300-year-old design when a few men came up with the idea for the Bank of England, where you have a central bank and they get to create currency from nothing, and it creates a permanent national debt. The public is always on the hook to pay back this currency that came from nowhere, plus interest. But then the Rothschilds refined it in the mid-1700s, and that made them the richest family on the planet for over a century. The monetary system was designed to enrich a few at the expense of the many. And it's not a good system. It does a wealth transfer to the banking sector mainly, and then also the government. Governments are in partnership, basically, with the banking system. And the whole monetary system is designed to enrich them and to make it easy for politicians to promise you free stuff.
Well, and it just seems that at this point, when I say who is this system even good for, I just mean, everybody on the planet, including Americans, because it seems that we are now, our number one export is not only debt, but war and the weapons of war. And it's just very disheartening.
It's good for the bankers.
Yeah.
That's who it's good for. It's good for the bankers. It's sort of good for the governments. That's it. It's at the expense, though, of the people of this planet.
Mike, we just can't thank you enough for your time. I want everybody to know that Hidden Secrets of Money 3, Dollar Crisis to Golden Opportunity, is going to be released the morning of Tuesday, the 24th of September. We'll put a link below this video we'll post it over at SGT Report, and you can most certainly find it at the very top of the page at goldsilver.com. We've had nothing but a pleasure working with you guys over the years, and we sure do appreciate everything you're doing, Mike, to spread truth and honor and, take this system back for the people, for humanity.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much. I'll talk with you later then.
All right. Take care, Mike. Thank you.